Hi, I'm Ron Baker. I'm the director of the Canadian Small Church Ministry Centre, sponsored by Small Church Connections here in Canada. I have a strong interest in small churches, perhaps partly because I was born into a small church, Kindersley, Saskatchewan. Interestingly enough, after I'd finished my ministerial training, I came back for my first posting in Kindersley Alliance Church, a small church. And then, after having left for 25 years, after a 4-year service as a youth minister, I came back as the lead pastor to Kindersley Alliance Church, where I served again for 10 years and have retired here in Kindersley, Saskatchewan. Recently, a report called Significant Church showed research from data gathered from various entities related to small churches. That could be denominations, that could be through various institutions that have been started, and through talking with small church leadership and pastors. It's particularly true that there are some things that small churches do well. They are relational. They are quickly adapting to society and what happens around them. Of course, we all know that small churches can also be too much in themselves and not enough outwardly focused. But truly, when a vision and a reality check comes to them and they realize they need to move out, they are very easy to adapt, to move forward quickly instead of being caught up in an institutional morass. One of the things that I've found, particularly in some of the discussions I've had in this last little while, is that we are finding there needs to be better training, more training for pastors of small churches. There needs to be more pastors coming to us as young people, as older second career people. Whatever that may be, there needs to be a new training regime that goes into place. A growing amount of literature is focusing on small churches, so it's not that we don't have a background and things that we can talk about. Small Church Connections, in collaboration with 11 ministry organizations, help to forward the state of the small church in Canada in a new, interesting study called The Significant Church. I myself run a podcast with small church pastors, with denominational leaders, with thinkers and academics. It's called This Is Us, Canadian Small Churches in Canada. And we have just put out, we'll continue to put out a survey that we have done of the first 35 podcasts. The researchers worked with me from Eston College, and we've put together, I think, what is interesting in looking at the small church and what the small church needs. Those are the foundations that we need to have when we consider the academics for small churches that need to come forward. Canadian authors are also starting to speak up, and as we run across Canada and we look at various ones, both research-based and very much qualitative thoughts and interviews that are being done, Canadian authors are starting to rise as they talk of the small church. Recently, I sat in a denominational exploration of that current group's advance and where they want to go. The cry for trained leaders was loud and clear. In fact, I couldn't have said it better myself, and it was coming from the pastors of the churches within that denomination in that particular region. What was the academy and the training centers need that was being expressed in various places, both in study, research, and in the denominational gatherings? What is needed in the training centers? While there's a broad avenue of study and things to implement, let me highlight the following that needs to be included in the curriculum and in the thoughts in that. First is that small church is relational in the way they do things. You need to know the people. If you have 50 people, if you have 100 people, 150 people, which is, I think, sort of where we should tap and cap our small church definition. If you have that many people, yes, you probably will know in one way or another everyone in the church, compared to a church of 3,000 where You will not know all those people. And so there is a relationship that develops. I would just remind those that are developing curriculum that they need to focus in on what it means to be relational. That responds to things like, how well do you get along in conflict? How do you advance? How quickly can you advance when people agree together? How do you change? The second one is one that I'm finding it's almost like mental health for the small church. The small church is significant. If we don't consider that to be true, if we think that it has to become the big church or bigger in number, I think we've missed something. The small church is significant. There is an opportunity for discipleship in the small church that is unusual. There's an opportunity for relationship. There's an opportunity for community outreach that happens with small churches and their connections with their community. We need to have a program, well, maybe not even a program, but just a channel to expose this reality to those that are being and thinking about being pastors in Canada and around the world, particularly for those going into small churches. And we need to provide for them the attitude that the small church is significant. Now, another thing that I think curriculum planners need to look at is that adaptation and change within the small church is not what has been said in the past, where, oh, it's this kind of cliquey thing, and that's the only way that you can look at a small church. Yes, there are times where there are conflicts. There are times where we need to be more open. But within the small church, there is a very quick response to needs. There is a quick response that can happen because 2 or 3 people can gather together, put their heads together, and decide on something in literally minutes instead of waiting months for a policy or procedure to happen and to follow forward. Another thing that is paramount in our training for small churches is the need to realize that experiential learning needs to be part of every program that happens for a small church pastor. When you think of that, that means during the curriculum or during the programs that are happening, there needs to be time where people get outside of the classroom. Perhaps they have, as I've heard said, badges that they earn that say, hey, I had something on a blog, I got response, I'm getting things back. They've ended up in a church setting, and they've had to deal with what happens within that church setting to move forward the program that is being asked of them. It needs to be experiential. Academic pursuit needs to happen, and I am fully in place with that. It founds the continued experience that will happen within a church, but you need to have research and you need to have study that backs up that experiential learning. So the balance needs to happen. And then there must be continuous access to training, particularly as our society changes. It can't just be that 3 years, 4 years, 7 years becomes the norm for training. And then after that, you just sort of make it on your own. It has to be continual access for training. Training institutions must look to the future. And let me say this, the small church is very much the future.